What would make a man take his own mother to court? Not just any argument, not just a family misunderstanding. This man, Mr. Hazelton, is suing the woman who gave birth to him. His claim? She ruined his life. He says she called the cops, spun a lie about him stealing her television and attacking his sister, and got him thrown in jail for 6 days. But here's the twist. Nancy Hazelton, his mother, isn't denying it happened. She's owning it. "I did it," she says firmly, her voice unwavering, "because my son is dangerous." The words hit the courtroom like a thunderclap. Even Judge Judy, a woman who's seen it all, sits up straighter, intrigued. A mother calling her own son dangerous? What kind of history do they have? Mr. Hazelton clenches his fists. His jaw tightens. "She lied," he fires back. "She set me up, and I want justice." Judge Judy narrows her eyes, tapping her pen against the desk. Family cases are never simple, but this one feels like a ticking time bomb. And the biggest question remains. Who's telling the truth? The gavel strikes again. "All right, Mr. Hazelton, let's start from the beginning. Tell me exactly what happened." The courtroom leans in. "Before we go further, tell us where you're watching from. If you believe in justice and truth, hit like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below." What could drive a mother and son to this breaking point? Mr. Hazelton clears his throat, his voice tense with frustration. "It started a little over a year ago. I went to my mother's house like I had done 100 times before. I walked in, used the restroom, and when I came out, my sister was there." His fists tighten against the table. "She accused me of trying to steal the TV. She grabbed my arm, yelling at me, and then, next thing I know, the police are there, putting me in handcuffs." The words hang in the air. Judge Judy doesn't flinch. "That's it?" she asks, her voice sharp. "You were arrested just for walking into your mother's house and using the restroom?" Mr. Hazelton shifts uncomfortably. "No, Your Honor. She told the police I hit my sister." Judge Judy leans forward, her fingers laced together. "And did you?" The room goes still. Mr. Hazelton looks down, then back up. "Number I never touched her." Nancy scoffs, shaking her head. Her voice cuts through the air like a blade. "Liar!" The tension spikes. Mr. Hazelton's face flushes with anger. "She set me up, Judge. She's been trying to get rid of me for years. She doesn't want me around." Judge Judy taps her pen against the bench, eyes flicking between mother and son. "Mrs. Hazelton," she says, turning to the older woman, "why would you lie about your son attacking his sister?" Nancy exhales, her voice steady. "Because it wasn't a lie. My son is violent. He has always been violent." Judge Judy raises a brow. "And how do you know that?" Nancy straightens in her chair. "Because this isn't the first time he's been arrested for it." The words slam into the room like a punch. Mr. Hazelton clenches his jaw. "That has nothing to do with this." Judge Judy's eyes narrow. "It has everything to do with this. How many times have you been arrested, Mr. Hazelton?" A heavy pause. "A few times." Judge Judy tilts her head. "Define a few." Another beat of silence. Mr. Hazelton swallows. "More than a dozen." Gasps ripple through the courtroom. Nancy folds her arms. "Now tell me again, Judge, who's the liar here?" Judge Judy doesn't say a word, but her gaze sharpens. Something is off. "And this case?" It's about to take a turn no one saw coming. Judge Judy leans forward, her voice steady but piercing. "Mr. Hazelton, let's be clear. None of those arrests were drug-related?" "No, Your Honor." "None were for alcohol-related incidents?" "No." "Theft?" "No." "Trespassing?" "No." Judge Judy tilts her head, studying him. "So, all of them were for assault?" A pause. A hesitation. Then, finally, "Some?" Judge Judy's brow lifts. "Some?" she repeats, her voice laced with skepticism. "So, tell me, Mr. Hazelton, if it wasn't drugs, alcohol, theft, or trespassing, what exactly were the other arrests for?" Mr. Hazelton shifts in his seat, exhaling sharply. "Look, I don't want to talk about my past. That has nothing to do with this case." Judge Judy smirks. "Oh, but it does. Everything in this courtroom is connected. And right now, the only thing I'm seeing is a man with over a dozen arrests telling me he's the victim." Nancy scoffs, arms crossed. "He's always played the victim, Judge. Always." Mr. Hazelton's face turns red. His fists tighten. "That's not true. She's making me look like some kind of monster." Nancy leans forward, her voice colder than ice. "Aren't you?" The courtroom is dead silent. Judge Judy turns to Nancy, her tone shifting. "Mrs. Hazelton, does your son have a history of anger issues?" Nancy nods without hesitation. "Yes, and it's been getting worse. That's why I had to do what I did." Judge Judy's eyes narrow. "You mean have him arrested?" Nancy lets out a slow breath. "Yes?" Mr. Hazelton slams his hands on the table. "She set me up, Judge. I didn't steal anything. I didn't hit my sister." Judge Judy holds up a hand, silencing him instantly. "Let's get one thing straight, Mr. Hazelton. The only thing I care about in this courtroom is the truth. So I'm going to ask you one last time." She leans in, her voice dangerously calm. "Did you or did you not lay hands on your sister that night?" Mr. Hazelton breathes heavily. His eyes flicker, his jaw tightens. "No." Judge Judy doesn't break eye contact. The air is suffocating. Then she turns to Nancy. "Mrs. Hazelton, where is your daughter? I'd like to hear her side of the story." A beat of silence. Nancy's eyes drop to the table. Her hands grip each other tightly. When she finally speaks, her voice is barely above a whisper. "She's gone." Judge Judy stills. "Gone where?" Nancy looks up, her face empty, her voice hollow. "She passed away." The courtroom shifts. The shock is instant. Even Mr. Hazelton freezes. Judge Judy doesn't speak for a long moment. Then, carefully, she places her pen down. "Let me get this straight." Her voice is slow, measured. "You're telling me the only other person who could confirm or deny what happened that night is dead?" Nancy nods. Judge Judy exhales, leaning back in her chair. The case, already complicated, has now taken a turn no one expected. And at this point, the truth may never be fully known. The only other witness? Gone? Judge Judy folds her hands together, her gaze locked onto Nancy. "Mrs. Hazelton, when did your daughter pass away?" Nancy swallows hard. "A few months after the arrest?" "Cause of death?" Nancy hesitates, her lips pressed together. "Health complications." Judge Judy tilts her head slightly, her expression unreadable. "Complications caused by what?" Nancy exhales. "Stress." Mr. Hazelton shoots forward in his seat. His voice is filled with disbelief. "You're blaming me for that, too?" Nancy doesn't respond. She doesn't even look at him. Judge Judy taps her fingers against the bench, her mind working fast. "Let me be crystal clear. This court does not deal in assumptions. I want facts. So let's break this down again." Her sharp eyes shift to Mr. Hazelton. "On the night of May 6th, 2015, you entered your mother's house. Yes or no?" "Yes." "Through an unlocked door?" "Yes." "Did you have permission to be there?" "I didn't need permission. It's my mother's house." Judge Judy raises a brow. "That's not how the law works, Mr. Hazelton. Did you, at any point, take your mother's television?" "No." Nancy lets out a short, bitter laugh. "Liar?" Judge Judy turns to her. "Mrs. Hazelton, did you witness him take the television?" Nancy's jaw tightens. "No, but my daughter did." The room tenses. Judge Judy steeples her fingers together. And she told you this herself? Yes. And now she's no longer here to confirm it. Nancy's face hardens. No, she's not, but she had no reason to lie. Judge Judy exhales slowly. All right, let's move on. Mr. Hazelton, you claim you never touched your sister? That's right. Judge Judy leans forward. Then tell me, why did she have bruises on her face? Mr. Hazelton blinks. What? Bruises, Mr. Hazelton. When police arrived, your sister had clear injuries. So, I'll ask again. If you never touched her, how did she end up hurt? Mr. Hazelton's mouth opens, then closes. For the first time since the trial started, he's speechless. Nancy's voice cuts through the silence. Because he did it, Judge, just like he always has. Judge Judy taps her pen against the desk, thinking. I don't like cases with missing pieces, and right now we have a huge one. She exhales sharply, then sits up straighter. Here's where we stand. Mr. Hazelton, you have a history of violent arrests. Your mother claims you attacked your sister, and when officers arrived, she had injuries to prove it. Meanwhile, you're telling me that not only are you innocent, but you're also the victim. Yes, because I was framed. Judge Judy narrows her eyes. By your own family? Yes. She tilts her head slightly. Why would your own mother and sister want to frame you, Mr. Hazelton? Because they hate me. Nancy scoffs. No, Glenn, because we're afraid of you. The air turns ice cold. Judge Judy's eyes flick between them. This isn't just a legal battle. This is a war that started long before this courtroom. And now it's reaching its breaking point. A mother claiming she's afraid of her own son? A son swearing he's being framed? Judge Judy leans forward, eyes locked onto Mr. Hazelton. Let's get something straight. Your mother says she's afraid of you. Why would she say that? Mr. Hazelton clenches his jaw, his shoulders stiffening. Because she wants to make me look bad. Nancy lets out a sharp laugh, shaking her head. No, Glenn, I don't need to make you look bad. You do that all by yourself. Judge Judy's pen taps against the desk, once, twice, 3 times. Mrs. Hazelton, if your son is so dangerous, why didn't you file a restraining order before this incident? Nancy inhales sharply. Because I wanted to believe he would change. Judge Judy tilts her head. But he didn't? Nancy exhales, her voice flat. He didn't. Judge Judy turns back to Mr. Hazelton. I want a clear answer. Before this night, had there ever been physical altercations between you and your sister? A pause. Hazelton shifts. His fingers drum against the table. I mean, we fought like normal siblings. Judge Judy lifts a brow. Define normal? Did these fights ever turn physical? He exhales, rolling his eyes. Maybe a couple of times when we were younger, but that's normal, right? Nancy scoffs, arms crossed. Tell them what you did, Glenn. Hazelton's face hardens. I didn't do anything. Judge Judy holds up a hand. Enough. I'm not here to listen to back-and-forth accusations. I deal in facts, and right now I have one undeniable fact. Your sister had bruises on her face the night you were arrested. Mr. Hazelton stiffens. I don't know how she got them. Judge Judy tilts her head. You were the only person in that house besides your mother and your sister. So unless she punched herself in the face, someone did it. And your mother says it was you. Nancy sits forward. Because it was him. Hazelton slams his hand on the table. She's lying. Judge Judy doesn't flinch. Instead, she exhales, eyes sharp. All right, you say you were framed. Then prove it. Give me one solid reason why your mother and sister would go through the trouble of lying to get you arrested. Mr. Hazelton leans forward, voice trembling with anger. Because they wanted me gone. They didn't want me around. Judge Judy cuts him off with a wave of her hand. You're telling me your own mother had you arrested just to get you out of the house? That's a pretty drastic step, don't you think? Hazelton clenches his jaw. She hated me, Judge. She always has. Nancy exhales. I don't hate you, Glenn. I feared you. The words hit like a punch. Judge Judy watches them both. Fear and hate aren't the same thing, Mr. Hazelton, and if your mother is telling the truth, that means we're looking at a pattern of behavior, not just one night. Hazelton shakes his head, fists tightening. I didn't do it. I didn't touch her. Judge Judy's eyes bore into him. So, if I were to check your arrest records right now, I wouldn't find any previous charges of violence? Silence. Hazelton doesn't move. Judge Judy nods slowly. That's what I thought. Nancy exhales, rubbing her temple. He doesn't think he's dangerous, Judge. That's the scariest part. Judge Judy sits back, arms crossed. Then let me ask the most important question of this case. The room tenses. If your sister were alive today, what do you think she would say? Hazelton's face pales. Nancy lets out a shaky breath. She'd tell you the truth. Judge Judy nods. That's what I was afraid of. The gavel slams, and just like that, everything changes. If his sister were alive, she'd tell the truth. But the question haunting everyone in this courtroom is, what exactly is the truth? Judge Judy studies Mr. Hazelton carefully. He's unraveling, his confidence, his arrogance, both slipping away, piece by piece. She adjusts her glasses, tapping her pen against the desk. Mr. Hazelton, I need you to answer me honestly. He shifts in his seat, swallowing hard. Did you ever hurt your sister before that night? He exhales sharply. No? Judge Judy doesn't blink. Not even once? His fingers tighten around the edge of the table. I mean, we argued sometimes, but I never hit her. Nancy lets out a bitter chuckle. Never hit her? Glenn, do you remember the time you threw a chair at her? Or when she locked herself in the bathroom because she was scared of you? Hazelton's jaw clenches. That was different. Judge Judy's voice cuts through like a blade. How? How was it different? Hazelton stammers. Because we were kids. It wasn't like that when we were older. Judge Judy tilts her head. Then explain the bruises, Mr. Hazelton. You keep telling me your mother and sister made this up, but the evidence doesn't lie. Hazelton's face twists with frustration. I don't know how she got those bruises. Maybe she fell. Maybe... Nancy slams her hand on the table. Enough, Glenn! The entire courtroom jolts at the force in her voice. Nancy's eyes burn with something deeper than anger. Pain. Years of it. You always do this. You twist things. You rewrite the past so you can pretend you're the victim. But I was there, Glenn. I saw what you did. Hazelton grits his teeth. I didn't... Nancy shakes her head. Your sister was terrified of you. She told me so many times, but I kept giving you another chance. I kept believing you'd change. But that night, that was the last straw. Judge Judy leans forward. Tell me exactly what happened that night, Mrs. Hazelton. Nancy closes her eyes for a moment, as if bracing herself. Then she speaks. I was in my bedroom. It was late. I heard a noise, and when I came out, Glenn was there, standing in the hallway. My daughter was between him and the TV. She was yelling at him, telling him to leave. She swallows hard. And then he hit her. Once, then again, and before I could stop him, he hit her a third time. Judge Judy's eyes shift back to Hazelton. You still want to tell me she lied? Hazelton's breathing turns shallow. His hands tremble slightly. She was trying to stop me from taking the TV. I just pushed her away. Judge Judy lifts a brow. You pushed her away? That's interesting. Because pushing doesn't leave bruises on someone's face. That sounds a lot more like a punch. Hazelton shakes his head violently. "No, I didn't mean to hurt her." Nancy's face crumples. "But you did." Hazelton looks at his mother, his mouth opening, then closing. For the first time, he has no words. Judge Judy exhales sharply. "Mr. Hazelton, whether or not you meant to hurt your sister doesn't change the fact that you did. And now, the only person who could have spoken on your behalf is no longer here." She straightens in her chair, her expression turning unreadable. "I've seen a lot of cases like this, but what makes this one different? You still don't think you did anything wrong, even when the truth is staring you in the face." Hazelton's head hangs low, his hands grip the table. I just wanted my TV back." Nancy's breath catches in her throat. "It was never about the TV, Glenn. It never was." The entire courtroom is frozen. Judge Judy picks up her gavel. "I've heard enough." She pauses, giving Hazelton one last look. "You're not just guilty of assault. You're guilty of never taking responsibility for the pain you caused." Her voice turns ice cold. "And I hope, one day, that changes." The gavel slams. Case closed. But the damage, the scars, the years of fear and heartbreak, those will never be erased. Case closed. But for this family, the wounds are far from healed. Nancy Hazelton exhales sharply, as if releasing a breath she's been holding for years. Her hands tremble slightly as she adjusts in her seat. It's over. But is it really? Judge Judy gathers her papers, her expression unreadable. She's seen hundreds of cases like this, family disputes, deep-rooted anger, cycles of denial. But this one? This one is different. She looks at Mr. Hazelton one last time. "You had every chance to own up to your mistakes, Mr. Hazelton. Every chance to show remorse. But even now, you're looking for someone else to blame." Hazelton lifts his gaze, his eyes filled with something unreadable. "I just wanted my TV back." Nancy lets out a soft, bitter chuckle. "And I just wanted my family back." The words cut through the silence like a blade. Hazelton's mouth opens slightly, as if he wants to say something, but no words come out. For the first time, he has nothing left to argue. Judge Judy shakes her head, standing up. "Bailiff, escort him out." Officer Byrd approaches, gesturing for Hazelton to stand. He moves slowly, as if his body weighs 1,000 pounds. As he's led toward the exit, he turns slightly, just enough to look at his mother one last time. Nancy meets his gaze. There's no triumph in her expression, no satisfaction, just a deep, unshakable sadness. And then, he's gone. The door swings shut behind him. The trial is over. The case is closed. But the damage? That will never go away. Nancy slowly stands, adjusting her coat. Her face is lined with exhaustion, but there's something else too, a quiet kind of peace. Maybe for the first time in years, she can breathe. She walks toward the exit. No reporters, no audience, just a mother leaving behind the weight of a battle she never wanted to fight. Outside, the air is crisp. The world moves on as if nothing happened. But for Nancy Hazelton, everything has changed. And as she steps forward, one thought lingers in her mind. I hope one day he finally understands. Fade to black. The sound of a gavel echoes one last time. Case closed. A mother walked out of that courtroom alone today. Nancy Hazelton may have won the case, but in the grand scheme of things, she lost something far greater. Her son. And maybe in a way, she had lost him long before this trial even began. She pulls her coat tighter around herself as she steps onto the sidewalk outside the courthouse. The world outside doesn't know what just happened in there. They don't know the weight she carries. Her daughter is gone. Her son is lost to his own anger. And her? She's just a mother who had to do something no mother ever should. She walks away, but deep down, she knows. This case may be legally closed, but in her heart, it never will be. And what about Glenn Hazelton? Where does a man go when the last bridge to his family has been burned? He stares out of the window, his reflection looking back at him like a stranger. For years, he convinced himself that he was the victim, that he was the one wronged. But now, sitting alone with nothing but the weight of his own choices, for the first time in his life, he isn't so sure. Maybe, just maybe, he was the villain all along. This was not just another courtroom case. This was the unraveling of a broken family, a painful truth that couldn't be ignored any longer. But the question remains, did justice really win today? Or was this just another chapter in a much bigger tragedy? Comment below. Who do you think was really telling the truth? Was Glenn Hazelton framed, or was he finally caught for what he had been doing all along? Let's talk about it. And if you want more real-life courtroom stories that shake you to the core, hit that subscribe button. Because the next case might just be even more unbelievable.